Welcome to PastCast. Join us as we dive into the events and lives that shaped our world. Each episode reveals fascinating facts and stories from history.
Picture this, an army winning battles, not with guns and bombs, but with inflatables and sound effects.
Sounds like a Hollywood movie, right?
It does, but believe it or not, this is real history.
Mm-hmm.
It's the story of the Ghost Army, a top-secret U.S. Army unit in World War II.
Yeah, they used illusion and trickery to deceive the Germans.
Imagine fooling the enemy into thinking there were entire divisions in places they absolutely were not.
And it worked. They pulled it off time and time again.
Potentially saving thousands of American lives in the process.
Absolutely.
And in this deep dive, we're going to try to unpack their story.
That's right. We'll look at how they did it, what kind of thinking, what kind of creativity turns illusion into an actual weapon of war.
To help us do that, we've got a whole stack of declassified documents, firsthand accounts, historical analysis.
Some really fascinating stuff.
So first things first, who are these phantom soldiers?
Well, officially they were known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops.
Okay.
About 1,100 men strong. But here's the thing. Instead of hardened combat veterans, this unit was made up of artists, sound engineers, set designers.
Wow, so not exactly who you'd expect to find on the front lines.
Not at all.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it was part of their strength.
Yeah.
The Germans were expecting to fight a traditional army.
Right.
Not a band of creative tricksters.
And how long were they active?
From D-Day all the way to the end of the war.
Wow.
Participating in over 20 deception campaigns across Europe.
Okay, so let's get to the fun part. What kind of illusions are we talking about?
Well, you mentioned the inflatable tanks and artillery.
Mm-hmm.
They were so realistic, they even fooled German reconnaissance planes from the air.
Wow.
Think about it. You're a German scout flying over what you believe is an enemy encampment. You see rows of tanks, artillery pieces, all the signs of a massive military buildup.
Right.
But it's all fake.
Just inflatable decoys.
Exactly. It was a visual mind game.
Playing right into their expectations.
Oh, absolutely. The Germans relied heavily on aerial reconnaissance.
Yeah.
So the Ghost Army gave them exactly what they were looking for, but not what it actually was.
And they didn't stop at visuals, right? They also used sound.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They had these giant speakers, powerful enough to broadcast sounds for miles.
Really?
They blast recordings of troop movements, tank engines, even construction noises, just creating this illusion of a large force on the move.
That's incredible. I mean, think about it. You're in the middle of a war zone, your senses are already on high alert, and suddenly you hear the rumble of tanks approaching.
It would be unnerving for sure, even if you suspected it might be a trick.
And that was the point, right?
Yeah, they were playing on that psychological impact of sound. I mean, even in everyday life, certain sound can make us feel anxious or uneasy, even if you can't see the source.
Right.
Now amplify that feeling in a war zone where the stakes are life and death.
And get this, they even had soldiers pretending to be officers, spreading rumors in cafes and towns.
Yeah.
Like whispering about big offensives or complaining about lack of supplies.
Oh yeah, they called it social engineering. Another layer of deception.
So they were kind of manipulating the information landscape.
Yes, creating this fog of war where it's really hard to separate fact from fiction.
I mean, it's brilliant, but also kind of scary.
Absolutely. It was all about disrupting the enemy's decision-making process.
So tell me more about the sound. How did they use sound as a weapon?
Well, they didn't just use any old sounds. They worked with engineers from Bell Labs.
Right.
Same folks who brought us the transistor and the laser.
Wow.
And they meticulously recorded the sounds of real tanks on different types of terrain bridge construction, even just everyday noises of soldiers' conversations, the clinking of mess kits.
It's amazing how much detail they went into.
It was all about authenticity, capturing a soundscape that was indistinguishable from the real thing.
So it was like creating this immersive sonic experience, almost like a movie soundtrack, but designed to manipulate the enemy.
You got it. They understood that sound could be just as powerful as visuals in creating a believable illusion.
But how did they actually deploy these sounds? Did they have like a mobile DJ set up or something?
Well, sort of. They had this amazing mobile recording studio. It was housed in a van.
Okay.
And it allowed them to capture sounds in the field, tailor them to specific missions locations.
Wow.
They used a combination of glass discs, wire recorders, which were the precursors to tape recorders, and multiple turntables.
Wow.
To mix and create these custom soundscapes.
It's mind-boggling how they managed to do all of that with the technology they had back then.
It really is. It speaks to their ingenuity, their adaptability. They were constantly innovating, finding ways to use whatever tools they had to create these incredibly sophisticated illusions.
So let's talk about one specific operation where their sound tactics really shine, Operation Viersen.
Right.
This was all about deceiving the Germans about a major Rhine River crossing.
That's right, a crucial moment in the war.
So the Allies are planning to cross the Rhine, last major obstacle before reaching the heart of Germany.
And the Ghost Army's mission is to make the Germans think the crossing is happening somewhere else.
Drawing their troops away from the real target.
Exactly.
So how did they set the stage for this grand illusion?
With their signature blend of audacity and meticulous planning, over 600 inflatable vehicles, fake unit patches, and of course their sonic arsenal.
Okay, I'm trying to picture it.
Imagine you're a German soldier stationed along the Rhine. You're on high alert, tensions are high, and suddenly you hear the rumble of tanks approaching the shouts of soldiers. The clang of what sounds like a massive bridge being constructed.
All coming from miles away from the real crossing.
Exactly. They created this phantom army out of thin air, using sound to make it feel real and threatening.
It's genius.
And it worked. The Germans were convinced that a major crossing was imminent at that fake location.
And while they were focused on this phantom army,
The real Allied crossing was happening miles away under the cover of darkness, facing way less resistance than anticipated.
that's incredible.
Operation Viersen really was a remarkable success.
It really highlights how effective the Ghost Army was.
They were masters of deception.
Yeah, they weren't just creating illusions, they were crafting entire believable narratives.
Like they were writing and directing a war movie, but the audience was the enemy army.
And you mentioned earlier they used social engineering as well.
Oh, yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Absolutely. So remember those soldiers we discussed pretending to be officers, casually dropping misinformation in cafes? Perfect example of social engineering. They'd let slip carefully constructed rumors about troop movements, complain about equipment shortages, or brag about upcoming offensives.
So they were playing the role of disgruntled or overconfident soldiers feeding false intel right into the enemy's intelligence network.
Exactly. They exploited that human tendency to trust first-hand accounts.
Even when they come from unreliable sources.
Sometimes especially then.
Makes you wonder how much of what we believe is shaped by these kinds of subtle influences, even in everyday life.
Fascinating question, one that psychologists have been grappling with for centuries.
The Ghost Army's tactics really highlight how susceptible we can be to persuasion.
Especially when it plays on our existing biases and expectations.
So Operation Viersen definitely shows the impact of the Ghost Army's work. But how do you measure the overall effect of these deceptions?
Right, it's not like they were racking up kills in the traditional sense.
Yeah. How do you measure casualties, avoided battles that never took place because the enemy was tricked?
That's the challenge with assessing the effectiveness of deception. It's all about what didn't happen.
Right. It's like trying to quantify the impact of a shadow. It's there, but it's hard to measure its exact dimensions.
A perfect analogy. We have to rely on historical analysis, anecdotal evidence, and some degree of educated guesswork to assess the full impact.
Oh.
But even if we can't put an exact number on it, the fact that they were able to deceive a sophisticated enemy like the German army repeatedly across multiple campaigns
Yeah.
speaks volumes about their effectiveness.
It's also worth noting that while they weren't on the front lines engaging in direct combat, their missions were still incredibly risky. They were often operating close to enemy lines, relying on their illusions and their wits to keep them safe.
Their courage might have manifested in a different way, but it was courage nonetheless, facing the unknown, putting themselves in harm's way to protect their fellow soldiers.
Right, and contribute to the war effort.
A reminder that bravery takes many forms, and sometimes the most courageous acts are the ones that happen behind the scenes, unseen and unsung.
And in the case of the Ghost Army, their bravery was interwoven with creativity, ingenuity, and a deep understanding of human psychology.
They were artists of deception, using their skills not just to entertain, but to protect and ultimately to help win a war.
So their story remained classified for decades after the war. How did these incredible feats eventually come to light?
It was a long process driven by the veterans themselves.
Okay.
They were sworn to secrecy for years, but eventually they began to speak out, sharing their stories and advocating for the declassification of their unit's history.
So it was a grassroots effort led by the very people who had experienced these events firsthand.
Exactly. And their efforts, along with the tireless work of historians and journalists,
Yeah.
eventually paid off in the 1990s. The story of the Ghost Army began to emerge from the shadows,
Wow.
captivating the public imagination.
I can imagine it's like something out of a spy thriller, except it's all true.
People were amazed to learn about this secret unit that had played such a pivotal role in the war.
And it must have felt like a long overdue recognition for these unsung heroes.
Absolutely. Their story is a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of keeping history alive, even when it's been hidden for decades.
It also makes you wonder how many other untold stories are out there waiting to be discovered and shared with the world.
History's full of surprises,
Mm.
and I'm always on the lookout for those hidden gems, those narratives that challenge our understanding of the past and offer new perspectives on events we thought we knew.
The Ghost Army is certainly one of those gems, shining a light on the creativity, ingenuity, and courage that often go unseen in the fog of war.
Indeed, their legacy extends far beyond the battlefield. It's a story that continues to inspire and resonate with artists, innovators, and problem solvers in all walks of life.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from inflatable tanks to sonic illusions to the psychology of deception.
Yeah.
When we return, we'll explore how the legacy of the Ghost Army continues to influence fields as diverse as art, technology, and even business. It's been a fascinating journey. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We encourage you to delve deeper into the Ghost Army story. There are books, documentaries, even museums dedicated to preserving their legacy.
And who knows, maybe their story will spark a bit of that Ghost Army spirit in you.
Yeah, inspiring you to approach your own challenges with a little more creativity, a little more ingenuity, and a willingness to think outside the box.
Thanks for tuning in to PastCast. We hope today's episode sparked your curiosity for history. If you enjoyed it, leave us a review. It helps us reach more history lovers like you. Stay curious and join us next time on PastCast.